Hey guys, welcome back to the Puro Wrestling Academy. I am your co-host Ray Russell, along for this fabulous ride through Japanese wrestling history, and here to teach us all. He's the man with the plan, the host with the most, the professor of Puroresu himself. Welcome back, Mr. Dan Ginnetty. Dan, welcome back once again to the Academy.
Thank you for having me. That was quite an intro. And ladies and gentlemen, class is in session.
In session. And so, teacher, I have my hand raised here right out of the gate. Before we get rolling with this week's show, I wanted to go back with you to last week's episode. A couple things I noticed as I was going back through the notes, as I was cleaning them up for the Patreon account, the insanely detailed show note area there. There was a couple things that I took note on, and I wanted to pick your brain, get your feedback on this. So last week, we covered that October 1st show from 54, the Tokyo Governor Cup tournament, if you will. And we talked about some of the guys going over earlier on the show, and then Rikidozan defeating them all. And this isn't really a revelation here. I was kind of looking at this last week as we were talking about it going, And obviously, yes, Rikidozan goes over all these guys, but you put over the fact last week that all these guys got big wins earlier in the show, so it didn't hurt them as much when they, lost in the big match here with Rikidozan, who was fresh, by the way, guys. But I still, it's got that Hulk Hogan feel to it. Not that Hogan ever did something like this, but it was so funny to see that Yoshino Sato, who was really getting boosted very fast, in the world of the pro wrestling here in Japan. And then, of course, he wins a tournament, 3-round tournament to qualify, last defeating Yusef Turk in a 12-minute match. And then directly after that tournament, we got a tag team match, Kokichi Endo and Surigami, who have been the number 2 and 3 Japanese, we'll call them baby faces here, for lack of a better term, underneath Rikidozan for that tour, that second tour in 1954. And they go over 2-0 against Bob Mumphrey and Jimmy Glarg. I should have let you say that name. I love when you do it. So these guys all go over, and then Rikidozan beats them all. Yoshino Sato, who beat 3 men, does the job in 1 minute and 24 seconds. Rikidozan over Surigami in 2 minutes and 20 seconds with a Boston Crab. And finally, his good buddy Kokichi Endo going to do the job for Riki in 5 minutes and 8 seconds. So I got to say, I'm totally on board with the fact that they put all these guys over to make them relevant for these matches with Rikidozan, but there's a very distinct possibility that he made sure to put these guys away in pretty safe fashion here, pretty short matches at the end of the cards, basically saying that these guys are good, but there's nobody on my level. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I call this a case of win-win, where certainly Yoshino Sato, who just showed up, he doesn't even know how to tie his boots yet, and he's winning tournaments, and he's getting in the ring against Rikidozan. So we're already establishing that's the pinnacle of Japanese wrestling, to fight Rikidozan. It doesn't matter what the result is for Yoshino Sato.
Right.
Kokichi Endo has been a, what do they call him? A loyal servant for JWA.
I would go along with that.
And he's the number 2 guy, or he's really Rikidozan's number 1 guy, the guy you can trust. So for him to get the 5-minute loss is kind of making him if the pecking order, he's still above Surigami and Yoshino Sato. And Surigami is the hot new guy, or the less new than Yoshino Sato, but he's the also guy getting pushed, and he's been getting pushed to the moon. And we talked about that last episode. Right. So again, this is the case of another guy just happy to be in the ring with Rikidozan. It's kind of, I don't know, I look at it as Rikidozan putting his seal of approval on all 3 guys, saying, these are my guys. Which makes sense, because, at least in my mind, because of what is about to happen in the next, 3 months regarding the 3-headed snake.
Right. Well, I'm on board with that theory. I also look at this as Hulk rules, brother, because nobody comes close to touching Rikidozan here in these matches. Puts him away. But again, it's got the rub to it. And I do agree with that point of view as well, as far as Yoshino Sato really has no business in the ring, in the main event. And here he is, just in short fashion, winning a tournament, like we talked about, working Riki in this main event elimination match, if you will, as they call it. Kind of interesting to see all these guys really the next in line. They are the top 3 guys right now, as far as that tour was concerned anyway.
Yeah, and before we go past this has been done since this time in 1954. There was a time in 1981, I believe late 81, after the end of the IWE Kokusai promotion, where Inoki agreed to fight Rusher Kimura, Animal Hamaguchi, and Isamu Teranishi all at one after the other. And almost a similar result occurred. And then I recall Riki Choshu's, what was supposed to have been his retirement dome show, where I think he fought five guys.
So we would see kind of like a repeat pattern in booking styles with this elimination match. I got you.
Yeah, and there's a way of Choshu saying, I'm on my way out, but here's my stamp of approval. Here's Takayuki Iizuka, who's been my driver, so you get a stamp of approval. I think Liger might have been in it. This type of elimination match where you feed the main guy other guys that are beaten in succession would be repeated in the future. So there is, I guess, some value to it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have repeated the move.
Well, we'll see how well everything goes here for the rest of the year with Rikidozan in the ring with guys. It's got some big matches, or at least a big match coming up here before the end of the year. We're going to get into that later in the show, guys. Before we get rolling into new stuff, also notice some interesting booking. I can't really call it pattern. It only happened a couple of times, but it didn't just happen in the JWA, but it also happened in Yamaguchi's All Japan promotion, and that's the second tour of the JWA and the All Japan shows. I go back to May 4th, the end of the All Japan, Yamaguchi's tour, and the final match was Yamaguchi and Kimura going over on Bulldog Butcher and Franklin, 2 straight falls. And then we fast forward to the JWA tour, the final night, September 29th, and it's Rikidozan and Endo over Hans Schnabel and Lou Newman, 2 straight falls. So the Japanese contingents finished strong to end both tours there. And of course, since Rikidozan couldn't really beat the Sharp Brothers for the world titles, that first JWA tour ends in a time limit draw.
Well, 2 falls, that's the right way to do it. Because let's be honest, Rikidozan and Kimura and Yamaguchi, they don't go anywhere after the tour is over. The Gaijin or the outsiders, they fly back home. Mm-hmm. So when it's the last show of the tour, it's like, dude, we're going to be here tomorrow, so we're the ones that have to go over. Otherwise, none of this makes sense. So to finally get a 2 straight fall win on the last show, it doesn't hurt your ability to draw. If you did that on the first show of the tour, who's going to buy tickets for the second? You crushed them in the first.
My last note here for this was, I was just going to say, Dan, I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. Was they made sure to book this to where they finish strong because they'll be here next tour.
Oh, well, there you go. We're on the same page then.
So, but I'm curious to see if that trend continues, if that's something that's going to continue every tour for a while, or if it was just a coincidence that we saw this in both promotions right after one another there. But it was kind of cool to, see that. Again, the top draws of the local area, if you will, in Japan, they're going over 2 straight falls. The other guys are headed back home. These guys will be here tomorrow. So I wasn't arguing the booking by any stretch of the imagination. I just noticed it, and it kind of stuck out to me.
Yeah, something of a trope, a pro wrestling booking trope, maybe. And who knows, maybe we'll see more of this in the future tours. Although for the next few years, tours are kind of spotty. They're not what you think of when you think of New Japan or All Japan running 6 or 7 or 8 tours per year, and they're always the same name. We are nowhere near that yet for the JWA. Right. Nowhere near it.
Not even close. But we got a lot going on here, and we only got a few months left in 54, but boy, is there a whole lot to talk about. So we'll get back into the things where we left off last week. I'll let you pick back up, and wherever you want to start, that's where we'll begin.
Well, we're going to back up about a week. We wanted to finish the JWA tour, which technically ended on October 1st. But the week before that, Toshio Yamaguchi, his promotion, had 2 shows in the end of September. So we're going to talk about that. It is called on September 25th and 26th in 1954, a, quote, Japan-U.S. soil tag team match was held at Osaka Pool.
Say that again, Osaka what?
Osaka Pool. You heard me right.
You mean a swimming pool?
That is correct. It is 1954, and we're talking about matches in a pool. The All Japan Pro Wrestling Association event pits Japan, the United States, and Turkey against each other. I wonder if that's where Jimmy Glarg comes from, Turkey. Against each other for the Osaka Governor's Cup, and the semifinals and main event on the first day are broadcast live on Osaka NHK television. So this is the Osaka market for NHK. Is going to air the top 2 matches from the first day. It was held for the first time in Japan in a ring installed in a 50-meter pool, and that's long, not deep, everybody. And 5,000 people watched the first day. 5,000 people watched, even though it rained. The match was broadcast live as well, so that could have hampered the attendance, because if you can watch it on TV, maybe even in the 50s, they're wondering why buy a ticket if I can watch it on TV. The second day, though, a whopping 17,000 people gathered before the match started on that second day, filling the stands all the way up to the third row. The rain had subsided, and the audience was excited by the thrilling battle in the ring. Well, that's a bold claim to know that the audience was excited, but I wasn't there, so
well, there were 17,000 people. Somebody better have been excited. That's a hell of a draw if nobody cares.
I know who was excited. The promoter was excited.
I bet he
Yamaguchi
was. Yes,
excited. So we'll go down the All Japan Wrestling Association players. You've heard of them before: Toshio Yamaguchi, Umiyuki Kiyomikawa, Hichi Nagasawa, Noboru Ichikawa, Kiyotaka Otsubo, Tadeo Todo, and these last two, well, I was going to say last one, I'm not familiar with Jiro Yamazaki, but I am familiar with Michiaki Yoshimura. They would face the outsider contingent from the United States of Henry Travis, Charles Nissen, Tiger Austin, Tanny Ewers, Lucky Jacket.
Lucky Jacket, wow.
Lucky Jack. What else can you say? Jim Grush. Well, if your parents name you Lucky Jacket, you better be tough.
That's right.
And Lawrence Koch on the American side. Don't forget the Turkish team. They only had 3 players.
That doesn't seem fair.
I can't even pronounce their names.
I'm not even going to try.
It's not
well,
fair.
Henry Johnny's here. Henry Johnny's back again for the Turkish side.
And Tames Zanura and Askar Bungary.
There we go. I still like Lucky Jacket. My money's on Lucky Jacket. Sounds like a horse race.
I believe he was in the Preakness just the other day. Now that you mentioned,
could have been.
The 3 different groups participated in the tag team match for the Osaka Governor's Cut. Yamaguchi and Kiyomikawa, Travis and Nissen for the USA guys, and Johnny and Bungary were the Turkey representatives. On the first day, the Japanese group fought the American group, and the winning group played against the Turkish group on the second day. So we do have some information on some of these American folk. Henry Travis is American. Well, that's a nice way to start. 6 feet tall, weighs about 240, former weightlifter. This is 1954. Weightlifting at that point had only probably been popularized for about 20 years. In 1944, he won the Pacific Coast Junior Heavyweight Championship. I wonder if that's like the Pacific Coast tag title that we're dealing with. He did fight Toshio Yamaguchi in Los Angeles in 1951 during Yamaguchi's training and lost by choke. He has strong arms and is good at throwing hammers and throwing whips. Wow. I love these detailed reports. This is a scouting report.
It is.
Henry Travis.
Hell of a newspaper report here.
Charles Nissen is 5'7", 200 pounds. He started wrestling at the age of 15. U.S. Marines won the U.S. Marine Corps Championship from 31 to 39.
If that's accurate, that's a hell of a fucking wrestler right there.
Yeah, and he's in the military between wars too. So this guy really wanted to be there. He also held the Chinese championship for 2 years from 33 and won the German championship in 38. Who is this guy? Featured in newspaper advertisements as the German Shanghai champion.
Jesus.
This is the first time he's played against a Japanese player. That actually comes from the Sangyo Keizai Shimbun Osaka edition, morning edition. So that's from the newspaper. Lawrence Koch, 6'3", weighs about 240. He switched from American football to pro wrestling. Hey, there you go. We've seen that before. After his debut, won the Nebraska championship a year and a half later, and only lost 2 of his last 80 fights. He's described in the newspaper ads as the Nebraska state champion. He's good at body hits, neck throws, and body throws. And these are, again, from the newspaper in Osaka. We have information on, that's it for the American guys, and we have information on 2 of the 3 Turkish folk. Askar Bungale is 6 foot tall and 230 pounds, turned professional in 1951 and won the All-Mediterranean Championship, wink, in 1952.
These guys are carrying all sorts of championship credentials.
Yeah, a lot of hardware coming into the ring on these matches. He's fought in Iran, India, Malaya. I wonder if that's Malaysia.
Malaysia, you would think, maybe?
And the Philippines winning all 30 races. He is described in newspaper advertisement as the Mediterranean Coast Champion, like the Pacific Coast Champion. He's good at dropping his body and throwing his head. All right, Henry Johnny. He's Turkish.
Henry, this is what I was waiting for.
Well, unfortunately, we have no information on Lucky Jacket.
Unfortunately.
5'7", and he is small, 165.
Henry Johnny, yeah.
Yeah, from 46 to 49, he was number 3 in the Turkish rankings in the amateur middleweight division. He started wrestling in Hong Kong in 1950, won all 6 fights. He has the nickname Squirrel and is popular for his agile and courageous fighting style.
They didn't work so hard on Henry Johnny's little report here, did they?
Squirrel. Well, at least he got something. Better than Lucky Jacket. We're just left to wonder. So there were 2 dates, the 25th in Osaka at the Osaka Pool, started at 6 o'clock. I'll just go right to the Governor's Cup Tag Team Tournament match. Yamaguchi and Kiyomakawa versus Travis and Nissen, the USA representatives. Travis pins Kiyomakawa with a body lock for the first fall. Kiyomakawa gets a fall on Nissen for the second fall. And the third fall, Toshio Yamaguchi with a body lock over Travis to get the win. They now get the right to play against Henry Janney and Askar Bungary the next day.
So Japan over United States the first night here in the Osaka tournament, or whatever you want to call this thing here.
That is correct. It is the, let me get the right title. It's not fair not to use the right title. I apologize. It is the Japan-U.S. soil tag team match for the
Osaka Governor's Cup Tag Team Tournament. There you go.
You got it. Right. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm looking right at it. I didn't have to look too far. Now, a couple of these matches were actually broadcast on TV, I do believe.
Correct. The last 2 matches, I didn't mention one. Hichi Nagasawa from Japan faced Lawrence Koch from the USA. And then that tag team match I just mentioned, both matches aired on TV on Osaka's NHK affiliate from 8 to 9 p.m. And it claims they've got both matches. I don't have a time for the Nagasawa match, but this one runs 15, another 15, only about 30 minutes for the tag team match. So you very likely could have gotten 2 uncut matches on television in 1954 in September. Not a bad deal.
Okay. Anybody curious, just real quick, Dan, the semi-main there with Nagasawa and Lawrence Koch. Now, Nagasawa is actually a trainee of Yamaguchi, so that's why we'll see him a lot here in these All Japan shows. I just wanted to point that out. Gotcha.
Yep. He's all those guys I listed are kind of working with Yamaguchi, except for Michiaki Yoshimura, who would become his own deal soon after. Sunday, September 26, 1954, still at the Osaka Pool. All I have is the final, and it's going to be Toshio Yamaguchi and why do I have Ichikawa here?
He replaces Kiyomakawa.
What is happening? Oh, maybe it was changed from Kiyomakawa.
Yeah, maybe Kiyomakawa drowned in the pool or something. I don't know. But he's not here.
You ever get like water in your ear, swimmer's ear? It could have been a bad case of swimmer's ear.
Possible.
So they mix up. Now you're facing Henry Johnny and Askar Bungary are facing Yamaguchi and Ichikawa. Ichikawa gets the pin over Johnny in the first fall.
Gotta make him strong. Deal. Yeah, you got to make him strong.
Yeah, Bungary gets a pin over Ichikawa 7 minutes, 24 seconds later. And Ichikawa with the second fall over Johnny to win the match. So this guy, Ichikawa, coming out of nowhere.
Right.
Cinderella story. Yamaguchi. That's one way to look at it. Feels confident enough in his position on the card that he is kind of anointing Ichikawa as his number 2 guy. Or at least that's how I'm taking it.
I'm curious what really went on here. Was it a legitimate injury, or was this an instance of the first night went down and Yamaguchi watched Ichikawa perform, who wrestled earlier on the show against another Turkish fellow, and then fast forward to the next day and he's like, I'd rather have this guy as my partner than Kiyomakawa. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how what continues on with all of these guys. But very interesting that just overnight, Yamaguchi changes partners, and unfortunately, we don't have the card, so we don't know that if Kiyomakawa even participated here tonight.
That is true. And the thing I don't get is if it was a legit injury and you go, well, I need somebody, hey, Ichikawa, get in the ring for me, you're not going to give him 2 falls. Or wouldn't think you would.
It's really weird.
Unless maybe this is Yamaguchi's way of double dipping. And show one has them win. But I don't know. Does he get anything? Yeah, Kiyomisawa gets a fall in the first match.
But Yamaguchi wins it all. I believe he gets the third fall.
That is true.
Yeah.
But at least he gets one of the two falls. So maybe they was trying to push Kiyomisawa and then try to push his other guy, Ichikawa, the next night?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I don't know his pecking order. We don't have a lot of results for All Japan like we do the JWA, so it's not as easy to figure out the pecking order. But Nagasawa's been with Yamaguchi since the beginning, since I believe the first JWA tour even had Nagasawa on that with him. And now we see Nagasawa working the semi-main on TV, and he goes over on the 25th, but he is not the replacement partner here. So maybe there was something in the works here for Ichikawa.
Interesting. Well, we'll see if they have any future tours coming up, and we'll see the position of Kiyomisawa and Ichikawa and see what happens to them.
Yeah, very good. That's the great thing about history. We can continue to watch this unfold and kind of put two and two together as we go along.
Yeah, it plays out real time on the podcast, although it's 70 years old. But speaking about podcasts, there's a podcast I discovered along with a blog. There's a guy, Robert Whitting. And I guess he's lived in Japan since 1962.
Wow, okay.
And he posts blog posts about all kinds of weird things. And one of the things he posted was about wrestling on television and what he had been told and what he learned. And I thought some of that information would be useful to help better understand how TV was broadcast in the very early days when not too many people had television to watch this stuff.
Yeah.
So this next chunk is coming right from his blog on Japan, and they're talking about matches, big matches in Japan in 1954, the big tour with the Sharp brothers. So I'll pick it up from here. The match made headlines in the Japanese newspapers, and the TV telecast was watched by millions across the land, many in outdoor squares where promotional television sets had been set up. They were setting them up in intersections or on the side of streets. Television was a luxury few could afford in their homes, so 220 giant television screens were set up in open spaces in Tokyo and near the capital, while others went to restaurants or appliance stores to watch the opening match. Now, I think we've all seen pictures of people watching important television events from the street looking into the window of television stores or stores that sold televisions. Mm-hmm. One example, 20,000 onlookers had crammed into a tiny west exit square of Shimbashi Station to stare up at a 27-inch mounted general TV cheering wildly at each Rikidozan attack. The mob was so large that it overflowed onto the main thoroughfare in front of the station, blocking traffic. Unable to move, taxi drivers simply parked their cabs in the middle of the street and joined the raucous throng. In Tokyo's Ueno Park, enthusiasts had assembled on an incline in front of a truck-mounted TV set. Many had climbed trees, rocks, and lampposts to get a better view, and several were so overcome with excitement at Rikidozan's performance that they fell off their perches, incurring serious injury and causing ambulances to shuttle back and forth from the park to the nearest hospital for much of the evening. It was estimated as many as 14 million people watched the match, which had the effect of a World Cup victory, said Nippon TV owner and media magnate Matsutaru Shoriki, whose TV network had televised the event. Quote, Rikidozan, by his pro wrestling, in which he sent the big white men flying, has restored pride to the Japanese and given them new courage. It was as if the Pacific War had been refought and this time won. Overnight, Japan had a national hero. The next night, Rikidozan emerged victorious in a one-on-one match versus Ben Sharp, 2-1. This time, 24 million viewers had watched the match, more than one-third of the entire nation. Prior to the opening gong, an NTV announcer, Nippon TV, took time to make this unusual announcement. A word to those people watching in the street corners and in front of train stations and department stores. Please don't push, and will those who have climbed up trees, telephone poles, and other high places please come down before you hurt yourself. Talk about being over.
Yeah, talk about, I mean, God, 1/3 of the nation is watching you on television. That's quite a few people. 24 million, and TV's still in its infancy. in Japan, which is crazy to think because of their technology moving forward. And again, I mean, they're putting up the television sets everywhere. I can only picture 20,000 people trying to watch a 27-inch television screen way back when. But yeah, man, it's crazy how huge this got, and an extra 10 million overnight.
Yep, and Rikidozan enjoyed the benefit of being on television, so both of these things were new to the Japanese people. So you had a new, quote, Japanese fighter beating up Americans, and you had this television technology as a way to watch it. So it was a spectacle two different ways. It was a spectacle because it was television broadcasting something, and secondly, because Rikidozan was winning.
So everything looks like it's going great for Rikidozan and the JWA. I mean, they're drawing like crazy. Look at the TV ratings here, 24 million for the match against Ben Sharp, which Riki won. So I'm sure, that even more of a hero there in that instance, with Rikidozan going over on the big white man. And so he's doing great, to say the least. Meanwhile, Yamaguchi draws 17,000 on the second night there at the pool. Why don't we take a look at what Masahiko Kimura's up to right now?
Well, not quite as well. Kimura did form the International Pro Wrestling Force,
right?
Which was based in his hometown a while ago. They claimed to serve as a local affiliate of the JWA, although the JWA took over operations because the International Pro Wrestling Group was just not making money.
Right.
Although it is remembered for being the first Japanese promotion to introduce Mexican lucha libre wrestlers.
So Kimura's promotion here, the International Pro Wrestling Force, is the supposedly the first Japanese promotion to use the lucha libre wrestlers from Mexico. And I'm very curious, since we can't find a lot of results specifically for the IPWF here. I'm wondering if any lucha historians out there have any results for some of the stars from back in that era. That would be kind of interesting to see if we can figure out who worked over here in Japan in 1954.
Yeah, talk about a podcast I want to listen to. I wish somebody would do this kind of podcast about lucha libre history.
I've tried. I'm working on it.
Very interesting.
I'm working on it.
All right, I trust you implicitly. All right, so that gets us through the beginning of November. There is no tour coming up for the JWA quite yet, but what we do have is a woman's.
Well, before we get there, can we talk about Kimura's big show?
Oh my gosh, I just skipped over it. I just said it didn't do well. Yeah, that's how poorly it did. Is I forgot it and I was reading it at the time. November 3rd, 1954. It was a national holiday, so theoretically he'd have people available. They wouldn't be working. They could go to the show. It's in Gifu City, and it features a best of three falls tag match, Masahiko Kimura and Tachinomi Matsuyoshi, I don't know who that is, versus Jim Uedinsky and Gentleman Jim. So Jim U and Gentleman Jim.
Well, Jim was a gentleman, and the other Jim was not, apparently. What I got out of this.
Yeah, it's like the Doublemint twins, except it's with Jims.
Sure, the Doublemint Jims.
Now, and I will say, Kimura and his guy, Matsuyoshi, won 2 falls to 1. I have no other information on what the attendance was. I know it wasn't televised. I can just guess.
I guess they should have booked Lucky Jacket.
That's true. Lucky Jacket.
Could have drew more.
I think we need to try to merch that guy up. Lucky Jacket. There's a whole world. We could just create a backstory for him, and you'd have to believe it because no one knows anything about him. It's one of the darkest mysteries in the history of Japanese pro wrestling.
So we're about to go over to the women's side of things here because you did some last-minute research here on some fun stuff we're going to get into in a moment. But just a quick recap here. Rikidozan's having the time of his life here in 1954. Yamaguchi's hanging in there. I mean, 17,000 is nothing to glance over here. 17,000, that's a lot of people on the second night there in the pool. After watching it the first night, everybody said, hey, I'm going to go out and watch this thing tomorrow. I'm going to go live and check it out because they only drew 5,000 the first night. In the rain, though. So give him credit for that. And here, Kimura, we don't have results attendance figures, but I'm thinking they didn't do so hot given the people involved in that match. Kimura, the only name that I recognize, and the fact that you don't know who Matsuyoshi is tells me that he probably wasn't a major player moving forward either.
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing. I just don't have any information on 3 out of the 4 guys in this match. And without an attendance, without television coverage, without TV coverage, what do you expect to draw? I mean, that part of wrestling probably is never going to change.
Right.
Because that's instant promotion for you. It's like running a 1-hour commercial every week. It's hard to beat something like that. And without it, I don't know what Kimura's chance of success is. Yamaguchi has television to some degree.
Yeah.
And maybe the effects of that show when he can pull 17,000 the night after a TV show.
Well, we'll have to wait and see what happens with Kimura here as we close out the year. But before we get to that, I think it's time to head over to the ladies' side of things.
Yep, 1954 on November 19th, Sankei Shimbun newspaper will promote a women's show, actually a tour, with Mildred Burke, the women's world champion, and 6 other American wrestlers. They're going to have 4 Japanese wrestlers, which I believe is incorrect. I have other information than that.
Yeah.
But they will have 3 consecutive sold-out shows at Kokugigan Sumo Hall. And because of the popularity of women's wrestling, more than 6 women's promotions are going to be founded this year.
Think about that, man. 6, that's double the men's promotions in Japan right now.
Well, without any of them having a Rikidozan level star, maybe they think the ground is fertile and whoever can get somebody over first wins. There's a little more level playing field. I have the Panikari and Shopi Nikari, who started female pro wrestling in Japan in 1948. Wow. They start the Japanese Women's Wrestling Club. The Matsunaga brothers, who you're going to hear more about going on forward, they're going to start All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling Association, which is the former body of what we now know as the All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling Federation.
Right.
Defunct. But so they're the predecessor to AJW is the All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling Association. And this was reported by Sankei Newspaper Group and Al Karasik, touring to raise money for crippled children. And in order to promote the tour, they would visit Rikidozan's gym on November 2nd.
Well, they're starting off smart.
Yeah, smart to stick around the guy that's super popular to get a rub off him.
And it's, before we get into the ladies and all of this discussion here, it's very important to go back. You talk about the newspaper group, obviously sponsoring this event. They put some money into this, but it's also interesting to see, once again, Hawaii promoter Al Karasik's name pop up here in Japan. He had his hands all over the Japanese wrestling world, sending guys over. You have to figure he was getting a little bit of the purse here on some of these guys or ladies.
Oh yeah, he's just here. He's just there to help. He's just there to help and get his cut off the top because he can make his show happen. Well, he can make people show up.
He's doing it for the crippled children. Don't forget.
Oh, that's right. Those poor children. Let's see. So the Americans I have are Mildred Burke, Mae Young,
right?
Ruth
Mae Young guys.
Yeah, the Mae Young that you saw on Raw with Mark Henry, and the less said about that, the better. Ruth Bokai, Gloria Barattini, Beverly Anderson, and Rita Martinez. I have 5 Japanese participants, Sadako Ikari, Katsumi Tayama, Hiroi Hojoji, Masako Hashimoto, and Reiko Tsutsumi. And I think that is all of them. Yep.
Yeah, that's the 11. There's 11 ladies, and you're going to see the Japanese side because it's an odd woman out thing. Because actually every night I do believe it's all the American ladies versus one another, and all the Japanese ladies wrestling one another. I don't know that we see any inter-promotional or I don't want to say intergender, international. Is that a thing? I don't think we have any flavor where we see the Americans versus the Japanese like we've seen on some of the men's tours here, as they're kind of working within themselves on these cards, but the Japanese ladies working the undercards every night, and then of course the Americans coming in and working usually the semi-main and main event.
Yep. Well, this would be not dissimilar to the women's matches that we occasionally saw even in the NWA days, WCW time, where the 2 girls would show up and they would wrestle each other, and it would be more of an attraction. Because of this, the 6 American girls that showed up saying, listen, we'll put on our matches, our show as an exhibition, and you guys can handle your business. But we're just here to do our stuff because we don't even know if any of you can work. We're professionals, but we also work with each other. If we work with you, we can't communicate with you, then the match is just going to be a mess. I can see that discussion occurring.
Yeah, but it's a pretty big deal to have Mildred Burke over here because she had her own ladies troupe. I think 20, 24, 26, something like that, ladies in her troupe by this point. Of course, she had already separated from promoter Billy Wolf, for those who don't know, was a big-time promoter and promoted all of the ladies with the original guy who had his hands in all of that. Eventually, he would go in with Moolah as well later after Mildred. But it was him and Mildred Burke that really started the women's business boom in the mid-1930s, all through the 40s, into the 50s here. She separates from Wolf, tries to run her own thing, but he's a man, and it's the 1950s, Dan, and he's still got a firm grasp on it, even though she technically has a right. So she goes over to the NWA and their annual club meeting, if you will, in 1953, I think it was, and women aren't permitted to be in the actual meeting. Go figure. And so she has to literally sit in the hallway while they discuss you can already guess where this is going. Who should get the hand, the control of the ladies? And of course, naturally, the NWA body decide that, yeah, we're not going to work with you. We're not going to allow you to be a member of the NWA, Mildred Burke. And so she kind of has to pull her women out of some of the southern towns that she was really doing well in. And they're kind of screwed here right around this time period. So it's wise of her to take some of the ladies along with her for a tour of Japan. And this isn't just the only place she goes. She goes to some other countries as well. And she's going to wind up retiring in just a couple of years, actually, because she's got to be, 40 or so here. But yeah, she had quite a career and was like on top for 20 years, for those who don't know. And to refer to as the women's world champion, everybody thinks about Moolah holding the belt forever. Well, Mildred did it first.
Absolutely. And Mildred was a legit athlete.
Oh, yeah.
If you see a picture of her, she was double tough. And on top of her husband being a world-class promoter, apparently, if you were to believe her, he's also a world-class jerk.
Right.
And
I don't think a lot of people have debated that.
Yeah. So nobody's a big fan of Billy Wolf. But you know what people are a fan of? Watching these women's shows in Japan.
Yeah.
Kokukigen Sumo Hall, 15,000 people, 10,000 plus sold out. They would go to Osaka Prefectural Gym a couple times, 13,000 sold out again. Kobe in the OG Gym, 8,000. Kyoto City Ice Palace, 8,000. Wow. Crazy. For 7 shows, they absolutely blew it out of the water. I have no idea how much money they made for the disabled people.
Right.
Because It was called the World Ladies Pro Wrestling Big Competitions Fundraiser for Disabled People.
And make no mistake about it, somewhere on every show, Mildred Burke was going over, rightfully so. She reigned supreme like the Sharp brothers before her. And I also noticed, I don't know if this is going to, do anything, because I couldn't find anything on any of these Japanese ladies, Dan, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with any of these names either. But
no.
I don't know who trained them, where they got their start, but it's kind of interesting every night that the names Katsumi Tayama and Sadako Ikari, they go over every night on all 7 shows here on this tour. And some nights it's almost like a little mini tournament. Then they'll both go over and then they'll work each other and then kind of flip a coin there because they both defeat each other. But it's kind of interesting. Every night these girls go over on the other talent. So it's just kind of interesting, the pecking order. I wonder who was booking that, who made that decision, who was in charge of the Japanese ladies. I can't find any of that information, so I'm still digging.
Yeah, there's very little information about the very beginnings of Japanese women's wrestling. And a lot of it was almost like performative, where I want to say they were like losing pieces of clothing. It wouldn't be like a full strip tease, but it was more of a titillating function. They used to have them in certain buildings. I want to say not a gym, somewhere else. And that was how they referred to the style of match that it was. Oh, it was not wrestling. It was more of
cat fight.
Apartment wrestling.
Apartment wrestling. Yeah, the old magazines.
Yeah, Sports Review Wrestling was the only one with the apartment wrestling pictures. I got a bunch of them. I got a bunch of them off eBay, and I go, oh, great, just to complete a collection of the Aftermags.
Sure.
And wouldn't you know it, all those pictures, the pages are just snipped out. And it's like, meh, oh well.
Wow. I remember even them selling the videos, they would try to live on throughout the 80s, early 90s, the old apartment wrestling videos. Nice. Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, I'm just looking at some of these names. Obviously, Johnny Mae Young on this tour, kind of interesting that she kind of aligned herself with Mildred, because this was kind of pre-Moolah as far as her just running the world. So Mae Young latched on to Mildred first. Some of these other ladies, not a whole lot on them. I did see Rita Martinez was one of the girls.
Yes.
She's got a match on YouTube that goes back to the 30s, so she has been around a while by this point. So certainly probably right there with Mildred as far as experience goes anyway. But just kind of interesting, some of these women that were part of this tour.
Yeah, the best way to describe Mildred Burke might be she was Moolah before Moolah was Moolah, as far as having a stable of women wrestlers that would go to shows and go to territories, and they would promote, we've got the ladies tonight, or we've got the midgets tonight, or we've got the wrestling bear tonight. It was something as an attraction within the attraction of pro wrestling to draw fans.
Yeah, so, man, talk about success. I mean, first night out, 15,000, like you said, on down the line, 10,000 plus, 13,000, 8,000, sold out. The whole tour was, to call it a success would be an understatement.
Absolutely. I am surprised. I would be surprised if they don't come back and do another one, but this is the end of 1954. We'll have to see what 1955 has in store for women wrestling in Japan.
Well, we will roll on back to the men's side, I do believe.
Yeah, I have one little note, a little news bite. On December 12th, a former Rikishi, Toyonobori, becomes a pro wrestler. You are going to hear a lot about this guy.
Right. He's going to become pretty big in the JWA here, in short fashion. Yeah,
I'm not going to give any of it away, but trust me, just remember the name Toyonobori because you are guaranteed to hear a lot about it. He gets involved in a lot of different things, in a lot of different directions, and it's going to be almost 20 years you're going to be hearing about this guy. Yeah, as far as wrestling history goes.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's fun that there's a few of his matches out there. Maybe we'll be able to cover them on videocast in the future against some very famous American wrestlers. And, of course, we're going to cover a lot of his wins and losses here, I'm sure, along the way. But I was going to say, most of the interesting stuff is going to be behind the scenes. I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, if half of it is true, this guy is a total wild man. So in some way, it's just going to be interesting story to listen to, and you're going to wonder to yourself, was he really that crazy? And I think the answer is yes.
Well, I can't wait to get into it. I'm thinking about some of it right now. So we'll fast forward near the end of the year here, December 22nd, Tokyo. We're heading off to the big city here, 13,000 people, and aired on live television. Once again, looks like a joint promotion thing here, Dan.
It is a big joint promotion show, and the main event is something that we've been building up to for a while. It would feature Rikidozan versus Masahiko Kimura. So we told you in the last episode, or maybe it was 2 episodes now, when they first got on television, it was Kimura and Rikidozan in these sharp tag matches, or any tag match that they had. When it was Rikidozan and Kimura, Kimura was the only guy taking a fall. And we also noted that the way the TV episodes were timed out, it was almost, on several occasions, it was the last thing the viewers would see is Kimura losing.
Right.
As you might imagine, that was the first tour in 1954. Kimura was not a fan of any of that. And in the second tour that he had from, August up to October, he didn't even participate in it.
Yeah, Kimura was not part of that second JWA tour.
I believe, let's see, I want to go back to the beginning. It starts with a comment that he made in the locker room, which was quoted as saying, Rikidozan's professional wrestling involves a lot of gestures. It's a show. If it's a serious competition, I won't lose. Which is basically challenging Rikidozan, saying, if this was a real fight, I don't lose. That was pretty much, hitting him with the gauntlet. You know what I mean? Like slapping him across the face, demanding a match against Rikidozan.
And Riki accepts that challenge, and here we are. It's a championship. It's for the Japanese Heavyweight Championship. Winner take all, apparently. And it's kind of interesting. And I should point out here, I didn't notice this until I think it was yesterday when I was going back over this. Rikidozan, they talk about how he appointed the referee, and the referee is Harold Toki. And people might recognize that last name from some of the JWA tour we did earlier this year. He changed his first name. He Americanized it a little bit here, changing it to Harold. But Toki was actually a student of Rikidozan who was working wrestling on the cards earlier in the year of 1954. So I smell shenanigans.
I do too. You got to watch out. It's like the Japanese version of the Hebners. Now this is I have an excerpt from the book The Rise and Fall of Rikidozan. and it is discussing specifically the prelude to this match with Kimura. They talk about the contract discussion, and from the book, the contract talks were amicable. Kimura is offered 30% of the money due to the two wrestlers, and he accepts without hesitation. The first match will end in a draw when the 1 hour time limit expires. The winners of any subsequent bouts will be decided by the toss of a coin. Kimura is flattered. Rikidozan has never agreed to lose in Japan before. Clearly, he sees value in an extended series of matches. Fans will spend hours debating who's the strongest, the action of each fight adding more fuel to their arguments. Tens of thousands trudge through the Tokyo snow, huddled in their overcoats, forging a path of graying slush to the doors of the arena. Some have paid as much as 20,000 yen for tickets on the black market. The chill in the air seems to dissipate as the chatter builds and the masses speculate. The consensus is that the fight will be exciting, and that while the fans admire Kimura, the majority expect Rikidozan to emerge triumphant. The fact that Kimura hasn't been defeated in judo in, 15 years, barely registers. Firstly, those who fancy themselves as experts pontificate. Wrestling is a completely different sport. The rules will favor the skilled wrestler over the champion judoka. Secondly, this is Rikidozan. How could he possibly lose?
Well, there you go.
Section from the book is very flowery worded, and it seems to be very pie in the sky type discussion. It sounds like the writing of someone who doesn't follow wrestling very well. There's a different perspective to it that I was able to locate, and seems to be a little closer to what I would figure. Rikidozan accepts the challenge and the deciding match, whether it be sumo or judo. It's held under rules that are advantageous to Rikidozan, no shock, and he selects the referee Harold Toki. We have actual testimony from Kimura saying that this match was supposed to be going around the country, basically go around the loop with it, so draw the first and then flip the coin multiple times. I have also read where he passed a note and requested that we do a draw to start and then go from there. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure which is really true.
True, right. You'd have to think, I guess, in all of this, perhaps the draw seems more logical. If you're really going to go around the horn with this, it would all only make sense that the televised match would go to a draw, which would lead to the rematches all around, the big cities to draw the people in, and then the flip of the coin, which, Kimura should have questioned that. But, up to this point, I could see why he was going along with this. He certainly needed the money, by all accounts. So I could see why he's, giving this a shot here going on. This is huge. This is announced as the Japanese Heavyweight Championship match. We're going to crown a Japanese heavyweight champion really here, is the story being told. And they're going to go to a draw, and then every town would subsequently get a Japanese Heavyweight Championship match for the title. So, it sounds on paper, it sounds like a moneymaker.
It sounds like a deal too good to be true. And if you don't trust both guys, if Rikidozan does not trust Kimura to play along, then how can any of this work? So, and Kimura's already stated his displeasure. He's already called out Rikidozan as fake. So Rikidozan can promise Kimura anything in the world he wants to, just to make the match happen and make money at least once. That's the setup with this card. But look at this. Like you said, it's an interpromotional match. You have the JWA with Rikidozan, International Pro Wrestling Force, which is headed by Kimura, and the All Japan Pro Wrestling Association, which is headed by Yamaguchi.
Right.
And they would have, the first match is the really tall guy, Zio Tsunagoro Rashomon. He pins Takeo Kaneko, who is also JWA. Osamu Abe pins Tomio Miyashima. He's JWA versus JWA. And the third match is Teizo Watanabe pinning Yonataro Tanaka, JWA versus JWA. Here's where it gets interesting. Yoshino Sato.
Mm-hmm.
We know him. He pins Noboru Ichikawa. You remember him? He was the guy that got 2 falls in that tag match against the Turkish team. And Yoshino Sato from the JWA defeats the All Japan representative. The next match, Surigami, another guy we know about. This one goes to a draw. Guy? Yeah, he is these two guys, Yoshino Sato and Surigami, are the JWA guys on the rise. And Surigami goes to a 30-minute time limit draw with Kiyotaka Otsubu from the International Pro Wrestling Force. So I'm guessing from this that Otsobu was Kimura's number 2 guy.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
would have
yet.
to be, right? I mean, I would guess.
Well, then the next match is a sub for Toyonobori. Toyonobori was supposed to debut on this show and did not. I don't know why. So Yosef Turk sits in with him, and he goes to a 15-minute time limit draw against Takeo Toda, and that's International Pro Wrestling Force. So International Pro Wrestling Force gets 2 draws here, which is nice. The semi-main is Kokichi Endo, of course. If it's semi-main, it's got to be Kokichi Endo because Rikidozan's the main, JWA, and he's facing Tachinumi from the International Pro Wrestling Force. Another guy, I have no idea who he is, but he's the semi-main, so that's a pin, but it's also Kokichi Endo. So right. I'm seeing a couple of IPW guys getting draws over big-time JWA guys.
Right.
So we're starting to smell where this might head if we're kind of throwing bones to some International Pro Wrestling Force folk.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that Yamaguchi has a guy in play here on the card, but Yamaguchi's not working the card. It's almost like he knows something's going down and he doesn't want to be too close to it. I don't know, man. I'm just looking around, and it's like Yamaguchi would absolutely want to be part of this, especially with the live broadcast TV, the final 3 matches on television here. I don't know.
Yeah, he can. I think Yamaguchi is smarter than we give him credit for, and IPW put over those 2 guys. Yamaguchi wisely does not want anything to do with this, so he just sends one of his emissaries so he could say he participated.
Right.
And we get to the main event of the evening.
Yeah, and I hope everybody did their due diligence like we advised everyone to do. We asked you all to go on YouTube last week and check this match out. December 22nd, the main event, Dan. Rikidozan taking on Mr. Kimura here, and I got some blow-by-blow I'm going to run down here in a second. But if you have anything you want to add before we get into the match, please do.
I'm just ready to roll into it. We built it up so much. Kimura is the agreed party. He is legitimately the best athlete as far as in a discipline of fighting. He's way better at judo than Rikidozan was at sumo. So maybe he feels like I'm the best athlete, I should win, which means I really don't understand what pro wrestling is.
Well, we'll see how everybody interprets this, or how everybody did interpret this when they watched it over the week. Hopefully they were able to do so. If not, hopefully they go check it out after they hear what we're about to discuss here. What I did was I did a little blow-by-blow of the final moments of the match, but what an intriguing, maybe, again, like I talked about last week, could be on one of the early video casts we do, because I'd like to call this one When Pro Wrestling Gets Real, a work turned into a shoot, if you will. Was it planned by Rikidozan? Some say yes, some say no, but everybody agrees that the finish was indeed real, Dan, that's for sure, much to
my gosh.
The dismay of Mr. Kimura, as Rikidozan, we see late in the matchup, he's getting cute with some chops, and Kimura fires back with a kick. The problem is that kick kind of catches Riki near the groin area, and you can see immediately on his face, Rikidozan changes his demeanor, almost immediately lashing back with a straight right to the jaw of Kimura, and it connects. And that kind of opens up some palm strike shots here. Rikidozan whacking at Kimura's head, and man, those are some nasty Dan Severn-esque palm strikes, by the way. And Kimura immediately trying to take Riki down. He's going to go into wrestling mode here, judo mode, where he can kind of control the situation. So he gets down at Riki's legs, but Riki, being stout as he was, he holds his ground, gets to the ropes for a break. And this being a pro wrestling match, what does Kimura do? He releases the hold. And here is where the real shit starts, at least for me. Plain as day. And you can see it right there in the video, guys. Go check it out. Kimura clearly trying to go back to the quote-unquote work here as he releases Rikidozan, and he turns his head to the right and begins to say something to the referee. And that's when Rikidozan just wallops him, a blindside palm strike to the fucking head. And Kimura finally goes down to a seated position. He's knocked loopy here. He's up against the ropes, and Rikidozan does not stop there. He then, in fact, blasts Kimura in the face, not once, but twice. 2 nasty stiff kicks right to the face of Kimura. And at that point, it's clear Kimura is knocked loopy. He's down on the ground. Rikidozan dragging Kimura to the middle of the ring and then shoot stomps him. It's almost like the old the Seth Rollins, the curb stomp, but to the back of the neck. and for real, guys, by the way. And he's not done yet. He's not done because Kimura keeps moving. So more palm strikes while Kimura's down on the mat. So we'll pick it back up on the other side. But at this point, it was very obvious that this turned into a shoot, at least for Rikidozan.
Yeah, once Kimura turns to the referee and starts talking, that's when I figured he says, is this going to be real, or is this how we're going to do this?
Right.
And then he gets blindsided, knocked down, and then I'm thinking, if I'm Kimura, I'm thinking, all right, can't we just go back to what we were doing
That's
before?
What it seemed like to me, yeah.
And that was not, I mean, it takes two to tango, and Rikidozan wasn't interested in that. Now, that kick to the groinular area was not the stiffest kick in the world.
No, nor do I.
It was almost
I don't think it was
like,
intentionally placed there.
No, it's like, give me some space kick, like a kick to create space.
Mm-hmm.
So for Rikidozan to see that as the green light to now I do it, makes me think that he was waiting for any reason to go get that green light and go to town on him.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think Kimura had reasons that he wanted to make money. And I think in the middle of this, he realized I need to keep wrestling. This is how I make money.
Yeah.
And Rikidozan was not in my promotion, you will. So he kept smashing him. And was sad to see. There was a time when Kimura did get him and put him down, but then let him go, because that's what you're supposed to do. So from a realistic point of view, if it was a shoot, Kimura kills everybody because he's the one who's actually good. But Rikidozan was in charge of the promotion, and Kimura was working with the promotion. And at some point, you have to be able to work with your boss, or you don't have a job.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate here too, because that cheap shot, that palm strike to the side of his head when he was talking to the referee, it started the beginning of the end really for Kimura, because he never really got his bearings back after that. Like, he was just knocked loopy there. And then those two kicks to the head, that pretty much did him in, but he still kept coming back as he's, dragged to the middle of the ring, gets the curb stomp to the back of the neck anyway. And then he goes back, because he's down on his knees. He goes back to Riki's legs again, trying to protect himself. Clearly unable to do anything though. He can't even move Rikidozan at this point. And I wrote in my notes here at this point, it's really unsettling, really, to know what's to come here in just a few seconds' time. Is Kimura going to get back up and stagger back into the corner that should be a protected area, safe space, but Riki just coming in swinging wildly with backhands and open palm strikes to the head of Kimura, who is still trying to treat this as a work at this point. God bless him. I'm in the ropes, make him break here. As the referee going to come in and try to separate the two. But before Kimura has a chance to get out of the corner, Rikidozan steps right back in just as soon as the referee moves, and it's more nasty open palm strikes. And finally, it's one final palm strike under the jawbone, into the neck, the artery in the side of Kimura's neck, that drops him on his face, knockout style, straight down, as the referee going to make a 10 count there, and barely raising his head at the count of 5, but the rest of his body doesn't even move here, as Kimura cannot beat the count by any means. And he's shown there with that swollen face from all of those open hand strikes. And the winner is declared Rikidozan. Amazing bit of wrestling, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, it was really an interesting match to watch. And hopefully you'll get a chance to watch us give commentary on it. We can all watch it together. But I agree with your sentiment about where was the referee.
Mm-hmm.
The referee had a bunch of chances to step in if this was going to be a legit match. But being Harold Toki and a
JWA trainee,
being the referee of the match, which side his bread is buttered on. He's not going to do anything to upset Rikidozan. So it really was leading the lambs to slaughter, if you think of it that way. So Kimura was trying to behave, and one kick set off this outrageous attack, and I can't imagine him understanding what is bringing it all on. And the fact that he doesn't release, he hadn't been wrestling enough to know that if you stiff somebody or you make somebody mad, they might stiff you with 1 or 2 hits to wake you up or let you know that they're upset.
Mm-hmm.
But Rikidozan doesn't stop. He just keeps going and going and going, with those hits, essentially sucker punches, because he's doing something that's not in the script, that's not supposed to happen, So there's no reason for Kimura to even expect it. And when he tries to talk to the referee, that's when Rikidozan hits him. That's kind of weak in my opinion. You shouldn't need to sucker punch him. If you think you can beat him one-on-one, then do it. But don't wait till he turns his head and then hit him.
I've seen people debate why Kimura didn't really quote unquote fight back here, and I think he was caught off guard, and it looked like he kept wanting to go back to the work, and it could be because, hey, I know I need a job, I know I need this money, I'm looking forward to this tour, this sounds like big money, and I don't want to cross Rikidozan, who's trying to cross me, so maybe if I don't fight back, maybe he'll calm down. That could have been one of the many scenarios there, but I think at one point here, Kimura was just knocked so goofy that he had no real option. But to just kind of try to defend himself more so than, strike back.
Yeah, at that point, it was just too far gone. And when you're taking full force kicks, expecting to take worked kicks, those full force kicks are going to do a lot of damage. And you're giving your body to your opponent in a wrestling ring. And that's what Kimura was doing. And it did not work out to his advantage, unfortunately, in this instance. Yeah, and again, I guess I should follow up. Yet another defeat that the whole viewing public gets to see on television. Kimura losing again.
And that story's been told basically the entire year by Rikidozan, that Kimura is not as good as Riki, and he makes it very clear here in this match. And I got to point another thing out. We talked about maybe they walked in, both of them thinking this was going to be a work, maybe not, who knows. But at the same time, once Rikidozan seems to get pissed off and go to town, he doesn't seem really shocked that, oh my God, I took it too far. We're supposed to go make money with this. I'm not supposed to win this match. He was perfectly happy. The celebration afterwards and everything, it seemed kind of planned to me that, I don't know that he knew that he could knock him out and secure that win, but it seems like he wasn't worried about the finish being changed, if you will. If it was indeed supposed to be a draw.
Yeah, and again, there's a debate on whether it was supposed to be a draw. I'm trying to find the source that I found that had Kimura offering a draw.
On
saying,
paper.
Can we do a draw on a piece of paper?
Right.
But that's not a contract. The fact that it was going to go 30% to the loser, 70% to the winner, that makes sense. That's part of a contract. But can we do a draw first? If Kimura is asking for one, that's not a good bargaining position to be in. But he was probably trying to play towards the concept that we can take this show on the road and we can do a bunch of these and we can make a ton of money for both of us. But it didn't work out that way. I think that Kimura unnecessarily, even though it seemed like Rikidozan had it in for Kimura from the get-go.
Yeah.
Long before Kimura says, if this was a real fight, I'd beat him. I mean, it didn't take that because that's the way Rikidozan had been treating Kimura all along. But this was an opportunity to take him out in a multi-promotional match that mysteriously Toshio Yamaguchi wasn't at.
Right.
He just sent a guy, hey, go on this show. Aren't you going? Absolutely not.
That leads me back to believe that Yamaguchi knew something was about to go down, that maybe Kimura didn't know that was going to go down, because...
Exactly. Right? That's what I'm thinking, too, because if Yamaguchi showed up, I guarantee you he would have gotten either a semi-main or third from the top.
He would have been on TV.
He would have been on TV, and he would have been able to beat... Maybe he would have been able to beat Surigami. Maybe he would have been able to beat Yoshino Sato, who's still coming up, but hasn't really established himself as a main eventer yet. And that would have made sense, but I'm guessing that he probably smelled what The Rock was cooking in 1954 and said, you know what? I'm going to give this one a wide berth. I don't even want to be at the arena. He'll be like with the British Bulldog. I wasn't even there. That'll be his defense. So we end with the television information. This aired on Nippon TV from 7:30 p.m. to an unknown time. But there were 3 matches on the show. Yusuf Turk versus Takeo Toda, which only lasted, that was the 15-minute draw. Kokichi Endo versus Tachinomi, and that only went 11 minutes. So you're 26 minutes in. And the entire Rikidozan Kimura match probably didn't take that long. So if they must have had just over an hour time slot for the TV show. But I'm thinking you're seeing all 3 matches complete on a live broadcast, which is a cool deal. Not for Kimura, though.
No, and needless to say, never a rematch between these two.
Oh my gosh, not at all.
There were you see Rikidozan agreeing to that?
Nope. I don't. The Rikidozan's way too smart for that.
I did.
Let me see.
I did see here, before you go into your notes here.
Yeah.
In regards to this, what Kimura called a double cross, of course, he blamed it all on greed and fame, said Rikidozan wanted it all. And, he didn't want to do business, go into business for himself here, did Rikidozan. So he called it for greed and fame, which I believe a lot of these guys do a lot of this for. But I've also heard stories of the Yakuza being involved here, telling Riki that you better win this thing.
Well, if it took that for this to happen, then I don't doubt that could have been a thing. But as we go forward in time, I think we see Rikidozan is convinced that he needs to be the guy that goes over. So it doesn't shock me.
Convinced?
It doesn't shock me that he would be the guy to go over.
Right.
Not this way, though.
No.
It's unfortunate, but maybe he had harbored resentment from the get-go. Maybe there were things said in private, not in public, that made Rikidozan think, I need to be concerned with Kimura because I feel like he would take advantage of me if I gave him an opportunity to humiliate me and make me look bad to make himself look good. And then what do I do? Yeah, they've got actual reports about the crowd reaction. The audience was surprised by the outcome. They thought it was different than normal professional wrestling match. The venue became silent. So this kind of reminds me of Bloodsport. You remember when?
Oh yeah, I know Bloodsport very well.
Chung-Li kills the guy with the heel kick, and the three judges turn their back on him, and the entire crowd quiets down and leaves. That's what I remember. It sounds like it's something like that. The crowd was like, "Whoa, what was this?" And
I tell you what, I got to go back and listen to the crowd response in regards to the finish. It was fairly silent. I don't know that it was, the way that I read that same thing you're talking about too in the description. But by the time everybody had time to collect their thoughts and whatnot, and Rikidozan was raising his hand as the Japanese heavyweight champion, he was getting pops. So that they kind of bought into it eventually.
Yeah, I guess it really depends on who's writing the story, because we already read one version of it that was very flowery and very wordy and very romanticized, I guess you would say. And then the next one was much more to the point. So it depends on whose ox is being gored on how you're going to portray the outcome of the match, I guess.
So are you saying that Chung-Li was based on Rikidozan? Is that what you were saying?
I believe I have said, Ray, I've said this for many years, that Chung-Li is in fact a Rikidozan clone.
Awesome. I love it.
He was jacked. I love that movie. Can we talk about Bloodsport for an hour?
Yeah, I talk about Bloodsport. Freaking Donald Gibbon there, man. I love that movie.
I just want to say the pro wrestler would have won it if he didn't cheer to the crowd.
Yeah, and play to the crowd. Chung-Li. Can't be doing that shit.
You can't do that. No. He would have won it.
Yeah, can't play to the crowd.
All right, enough Bloodsport talk. Well, actually, fake Bloodsport in that case, and real Bloodsport with what happened between Rikidozan and Kimura.
I'm asking everybody out there, if they did not watch that, this past week, to go check that out. I mean, yes, screw jobs and shoots have taken place prior to this time period, even in 1950s, but this is one that's documented on film, and it's interesting for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, this class does not assign a lot of homework. This is an assignment of homework. Watch this match. If we haven't expressed enough interesting details about the match for you to seek it out, then you still need to do it because I'm telling you to. It's homework for you. It will be graded and not on a curve.
Well, I think everybody's going to get some enjoyment out of that because it's a hell of a fight, that's for sure.
No doubt about it, and it is a little creepy when you see things go sideways, because it's scary. It's like in a boxing match where one boxer starts getting hit and they turn their back on their opponent. That's scary. That's when people get really hurt. So when you see Kimura turn his head and start talking to the referee and get slammed and then try to go back to a regular wrestling match, it's like, ooh, I think that's the worst thing you can do. Instead of turtling or trying to defend yourself, might have been a better move, but he had one last hope that Rikidozan was going to regain his composure and try to have a regular match, and that did not happen.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puroresu, Mr. Dan Ginnetty. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron. I'm talking about that $5 all access tier over at Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, Patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts for just $5, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. We also offer remastered versions of the earliest episodes of The Grenade Show, covering the 1989 NWA project. Includes enhanced sound quality, plus new content and conversation never heard before. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series, covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. And for those who like all of their podcasts in one nice, neat little pile, the WrestleCopia Patreon also offers a Patreon exclusive Spotify account. You can actually go over to your Spotify with your WrestleCopia Patreon credentials. Instead of listening or downloading directly from Patreon, you can go over to Spotify, listen to all the latest shows, including all of the early releases. And you get all of that and so much more for just $5. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come. What a way to close out 1954, though, Dan.
We covered less than 3 months, and it took over an hour, almost an hour and a half, to cover 3 months in 1954. I told you guys this is a very meaty subject, and we're not skimping. We're giving you a ton of information. We're skipping some things that we don't find relevant, but there's still more out there. You are getting your full entertainment value for your podcast dollar.
To quote the Honky Tonk Man, a total entertainment package, guys. Think about that, though. I mean, wrestling in a pool, a ladies' tour, and a shoot fight, all of that in 1954 Japan.
It's crazy. It's the history. We told you we are building a very wide base. This pyramid is going to be super tall by the time we're done with it. But all of this matters. We talked about Toyonobori debuting. We were talking about the ascension of Yoshino Sato, Surigami. There's a guy that's going to show up in a few months that you're going to be hearing about as well, who's going to be a big player with the JWA. This is where the story begins, and we're giving you every shred of info that we think is relevant so that you can really appreciate and enjoy the story that continues to be told as we move forward.
Well, we still got certainly some time left in this program, Dan, if you want to kick off 1955, any relevant stuff going on in the early part of the year.
Oh, yeah. Yep. There is something that's very relevant and very important.
I kind of knew that, guys.
Thanks for the setup. The three-headed snake, I think we can say as of December 22nd.
One of the heads got chopped off.
Yeah, it is a two-headed snake now. We're not Ghidra anymore. We're down to two heads on this snake.
No more Kimura.
And that's what I was going to say. There is a match that is going to be signed between Rikidozan and Toshio Yamaguchi.
Uh-oh.
And this match is going to be held in January 28th.
I got to ask you, if you're Yamaguchi, after you watch that shit go down, how much are you trusting Rikidozan here?
I trust him implicitly because I'm going to go to him and say, hey, Rikidozan, what do you want to do? How do you want this to go? I'm all for it. Whatever you say. Whatever you say, boss.
I take it one step further. Hey, Ricky, how do you want me to lay down for you?
Well, that's really what he's saying. I did find in a fantastic book, Japanese Wrestling, the Rikidozan era. I got a Amazon version, like a Kindle copy. Mm-hmm. Fantastic book. You should avail yourself of this book if you are a fan of old school Japanese professional wrestling. Tons of info, tons of results, and it's just a really good treatment by a couple of Japanese wrestling historians. Not that there's many, but I was able to find some information regarding the build-up to this match.
What was the name of this book?
I believe it is titled History of Japanese Wrestling, the Rikidozan Years.
Okay, cool.
You know what?
I'm going to have to go look that up myself.
I'll find it. We'll put in...
we'll come back to that.
Put in the link. So, in regards to this match coming up with Toshio Yamaguchi, there is a claim that the contract was actually signed back in November. So talk about signing think of Yamaguchi now. He signs a contract in November to fight Rikidozan and sees what happens to Kimura, who's like 3 levels above him in judo. Imagine what Yamaguchi's going through from December 23rd all the way to January 28th.
Right.
He's got to be a nervous Nelly.
Yeah, the Japanese heavyweight title on the line.
A signing ceremony for this match between Rikidozan and Yamaguchi was held on November 27th at a studio in Ofuna where Rikidozan was filming a movie about his life. 1954.
Playing himself, kind of like Jackie Robinson's story.
Yep, or one of the Santo movies or something.
Yeah.
It's 1954. The guy hasn't even held 4 wrestling tours in Japan, and he's already having films made about his life.
He's got a movie about his life, yeah.
So we'll speak about the importance of his television coverage in February of 1954. You can see it. It took over the entire country to the point where Rikidozan is having movies made about him 8 months later.
Yeah, he signed up for that real fast.
So in regards to this match, this is the first, this isn't even a tour. It is called the Pro Wrestling Japan Championship match. We're going to go from 2 heads on this snake down to 1. And it is on January 28th. Now, there are some words here that appear to be speculation from that book I mentioned on Amazon. Rikidozan took great care not to repeat the same mistake he had made in his match against Kimura. He decided to fight cleanly on this one. So we'll go to the card, which we have 2 different house show attendances, 9,000 or 13,000. I think both of them are going to make you money.
Yeah.
I don't see anything outrageous on the card. It is kind of a co-promotional card, so you do have Michiaki Yoshimura, who at the time was an All Japan Pro Wrestling Association member, along with, now we have finally have the real debut of Toyonobori, who pins Jiro Yamazaki, an All Japan guy, in 9 minutes and 26 seconds. So welcome to the world of wrestling. Toyonobori gets a win. Suragami gets a 30-minute draw with Ichikawa, who Yamaguchi was elevating in All Japan. And we have a tag match with Yosef Turco and Kokichi Endo defeating Kiyomigawa and Wataru Nagasawa, the All Japan team.
Well, these All Japan guys aren't faring very well tonight.
No, they're. That's weird. I'm looking at them all lined up. They're all on one side of the ledger here.
Well, Yoshimura for now, I guess, did get the pin, I guess.
Although, yeah, that's the only one though, and he's barely basically debuting as well. So Nagasawa gets the pin on Turco, and then Kokichi Endo gets the next 2 falls for the win. So at least it wasn't straight falls. We make it to the Japanese heavyweight title, of which there is no title, no belt exists, but they just talk about fighting for the championship. Rikidozan defeats Toshio Yamaguchi, 2 straight falls.
First straight falls. Talk about a guy who was in there to do business, right? Yamaguchi, whatever you want, 2 straight falls. All right.
Yep, that's fine. But check this out. First fall is in 23 minutes, 59 seconds with a pin. Uh-huh. Second fall is 6 minutes, 31 seconds, count out of ring.
Now, was that Riki saying, all right, I appreciate you. You're not giving me a hard time. You're letting me do things my way. So I'll give you a little bit and I'll save face with you and just do a count out for the finish.
That you're reading my mind. That's how I took this. Is I'm not going to beat your face in. I'm going to beat you 2 straight falls, but I'm going to have you save some face by getting counted out for the second fall.
Yeah,
and that's where I can go back to this book I was mentioning. Rikidozan fought cleanly, won the match when Yamaguchi was counted out of the ring. Unfortunately, the poor loser made an excuse that he had a broken rib before the title match.
Wow. So he made that claim after the match.
It doesn't say before or after. I'm guessing after, because then you can't get shot on.
That's what I was thinking. You said what?
He pulled a LeBron there and claimed that he was hurt after he lost. But they say the defeat still ruined his reputation. The match was totally business. It was not a shoot. Yamaguchi would continue to work with Japanese wrestlers who practiced judo, and we can go into the future of him. But with Rikidozan having defeated both Kimura and Yamaguchi, there were no other worthy rivals for him, and everyone regarded him to be the best wrestler in Japan. From that point on, he never accepted another challenge from a Japanese wrestler.
Wow.
Exactly. That's pretty high praise for this series of matches, because we just covered these 2 matches that will never happen again. The 3-headed snake is now a 1-headed snake, and it's all Rikidozan all the time.
In a matter of 5 weeks, he secured these 2 matches, beat both guys, and he is the king now of Japan. He's defeated both of them very definitively. Obviously, 2 falls here in this one, and then just obviously straight up knockout in the Kimura battle. And really, if you go back to that October 1st show, he even said, I got some plans coming up here, so I'll make sure, I'll humble all my guys too, take out Endo, Suragami, and Yoshino Sato. So he's beat everybody who has any kind of relevance here at this point.
That is correct. If he can beat Suragami, then he'll really have completed the grand slam of beating everybody. So this was just a 1-match show. There is no tour associated with this. There would be another match about 2 weeks later, titled the Rikidozan Send-Off Special Match to America. Yes, folks, he's going back to America. The interesting part about this show is that it's going to be televised. Oh, we should back up. Okay. Remember that win that Rikidozan got over Toshio Yamaguchi in 2 straight falls?
Yes.
That match was not televised.
Oh, okay. So
how is this of the Japanese the Japanese heavyweight title not being televised? How does that happen? Unless he's trying to protect Yamaguchi from looking bad on TV. Losing is one thing, but losing on TV obviously isn't good.
I'm also curious, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, because I don't know how. It seems like something as big as this could have gotten television exposure at the drop of a hat if they just asked for it. But I'm wondering how much in advance they needed to okay these things, because I'm also wondering if Rikidozan wasn't even supposed to be the Japanese heavyweight champion at this point. If we believe the whole draw story with Kimura, then did they really have a reason to present this as a match on television? But obviously, they've known for 5 weeks by this point that he was champ. So I agree. It's kind of interesting. But you'd think, man, they would want I don't know. Yeah, it seems like Rikidozan gets along with Yamaguchi. He kind of protects him.
Yep. The only reason that makes sense to me on why this match was not televised is that when they went to Nippon Television and said, hey, we got another show for you to televise, and they said, oh, where you almost kill someone in the ring? We're going to pass on that.
Well,
we didn't like what happened last time in front of everyone during prime time. So,
hey, Ricky, I think you need to go back to the States and let things cool over.
Yeah. It's like a Jordan thing in, what was it, 93. You need to not be here for a while. It's getting too hot for you. So I don't know what the real reason was. It could have been the network executive saying we'd rather not have gladiator battles of this nature, of this savage nature on TV. Or maybe it just didn't work out because less than 2 weeks later, on February 7th, Tokyo, at the Riki Pro Wrestling Center, which was finally established, there was a live TV show that had 3 matches on it. Toyonobori in a 15-minute match against Tomiya Miyajima, Yoshino Sato and Tanaka versus Osamu Abe and Yusuf Turko, and an exhibition match, 15 minutes, Rikidozan versus Kokichi Endo. Exhibition match. What's up with that?
Yeah, interesting. Way to word these things. The Japanese heavyweight champion, obviously the title not on the line here, 15-minute exhibition, taking on good buddy Kokichi Endo, the guy who we called the number 4 for most of 1954, underneath the three-headed snake, and now he gets to work Endo on the way out.
Yeah, he worked up to number 2 now. He's right below. There is nobody. The rungs on the ladder above him have disappeared in the form of Kimura and Yamaguchi. So now Endo stuck around and was the loyal servant, and now he's number 2. And I wonder, I'm not putting on my Sherlock Holmes hat or anything, but the fact that this is listed as an exhibition match maybe made the television executives a little more comfortable that things aren't going to get crazy. Because in an exhibition match, you're not expected to have a lot of bloodshed. I'm just spitballing, I'm guessing here, but it wouldn't surprise me if this was listed as an exhibition match to placate some nervous TV executives in 1955. Nippon Television would air it from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. I don't have the times for any of the matches, but if you're talking 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and 15 minutes, they would all fit even if they all were draws.
Right.
So you might have seen 3 complete matches on the February 7th television show from Nippon TV.
I have a feeling that the final match was not a draw. That's just a feeling that I have anyway. I could very well be wrong. Even if it went 14 minutes and 59 seconds, I feel like there was a winner there. I don't know who it was, but I just feel like there was a winner.
Maybe you could flip a coin. Just flip a coin with those two. That's what I do.
Exhibition, Rikidozan and Endo.
Yeah, Endo. Might be Endo's lucky day. You never know it. The monkey of Japanese professional wrestling.
Oh, man. I think he's
so that's
a little higher up on the card than that, but yeah. We've talked about the monkeys here. They come up a bit here in Japan, don't they, Dan?
I am going to bring up the monkeys as often as I can. I love the monkeys. They're great. Even their shoot interview is great. That was February 7th, guys, we talked about. The send-off for Rikidozan. On February 8th, a farewell party for Rikidozan and Azumafuji, who is a sumo guy that Rikidozan wants to groom to become a pro wrestler. The party was for both of them was held at the Imperial Hotel. Rikidozan was going to be going to Hawaii to acquire further skills, and Azumafuji was going to go to Hawaii to, quote, teach sumo to Japanese residents in Hawaii. And that story was believed by roughly nobody. Newspapers were reporting that there is no doubt that Azumafuji will be training for professional wrestling. So even the papers didn't buy it for a second.
All the way back then, they weren't buying it. So Azumafuji, which we know will become a professional wrestler. Spoiler alert there, guys. 70-year-old spoiler alert, but Azumafuji on his way to becoming a pro wrestler here, for sure.
Yep. On February 15th, 10:45 p.m., those two will board a Pan American Airways flight departing from Tokyo International Airport in Haneda and head to Hawaii. Rikidozan will play a singles match against Don Beitelman, later Don Curtis.
Yeah.
At the Honolulu tournament on April 3rd. Wow, that's a lot later. And he would then attend Azumafuji's debut match the following week, which would be on April 10th.
So they're leaving in February. Azumafuji not going to become a professional wrestler. By the middle of April, 2 months later, he's a professional wrestler.
Yep, that's how it works out. That book I mentioned, there's some information about Toyonobori that might be of use. So we'll loop into this. Toyonobori was another sumo wrestler who gave up the sport for pro wrestling. Azumafuji, who had reached the Yokozuna level, which is the highest ranking
Grand
sumo,
champion. Yeah.
also left for the JWA. Now, we've mentioned this guy. He's been Rikidozan's patron all along, Shinsaku Nita. He had been Rikidozan's patron and Azumafuji during their sumo days.
Okay.
He mediated this meetup between Rikidozan and Azumafuji because Rikidozan had begun to assume a haughty attitude even towards his sponsor, Nita. So that's being crazy. This is Rikidozan starting to
not
believe
really
his own hype.
I've really been digging into a lot of things. There's a book called Tokyo Underworld, I believe it's called, and there's a whole chapter in there on Rikidozan and in the whole Yakuza and things of that nature. So it's very interesting. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, that blog I had mentioned before, there are some other things related to Rikidozan that we can get into when the time is right, when it comes to it chronologically. But
it's just reading his mannerisms and his behavior here. It's not really surprising, is I guess the point I was trying to make.
I agree. This is all playing to form for somebody who has a very high opinion of himself and gets that opinion reinforced by everyone. The television stations, he's a superstar. He's the Hulk Hogan of Japan back in 1955, and he can't do anything wrong. You know, he doesn't have to pay for a dinner ever because he's so popular. Nita introduces this mediation ceremony or mediation meeting between Rikidozan and Azumafuji because Rikidozan's getting too big for his britches and is starting to talk crap even to his own sponsor, Nita, in spite of the fact that Riki owed Nita a lot. Nita had given him the helping hand when he gave up sumo. He got him started. And it was reported that success went to Rikidozan's head. That's a good phrase, and it makes you understand the position they're in. And he became very conceited, and Nita hoped that the former grand champion's presence of Azumafuji would deflate Rikidozan a little bit because Azumafuji actually was the best sumo wrestler.
Right.
Where Rikidozan was just a sumo wrestler.
He was just there, yeah.
So introducing Azumafuji might deflate Rikidozan's ego a little bit because Rikidozan ended his own career only as a sekiwake, which is like the third rank. As Rikidozan had built up a good relationship with Azumafuji in their sumo days, he welcomed the old friend, thinking there'd be no reason to take advantage of his popularity among sumo fans. Unfortunately, it was too big a burden for Azumafuji, who differed greatly from his heyday in sumo, to outrank Rikidozan in American-style wrestling. I'm not sure what that sentence means, but
I don't know how to read that either, the way it's worded anyway. But
yeah, he hasn't even debuted yet, so I'm not even sure how this will play out. But according to the Honolulu Star Bulletin, Azumafuji trained with Rikidozan and made his debut against Don Curtis on April 10th, 1955. And on April 17th, he ended up teaming Rikidozan a week later in Honolulu to win the Hawaiian Tag Team title, also known as...
Talk about winning a title coming out of the gate, man.
Look at all these guys. They're moving up fast.
Yeah.
And they would win the Primo Trophy from Bobby Bruns and Lucky Siminovich. Not Lucky Jacket, Lucky Siminovich.
Lucky Siminovich, the original Lucky here. In the Puro Wrestling Academy shows, we've talked about Lucky Siminovich a couple of times in the past.
He could only wish to be as cool as Lucky Jacket.
Yeah, well, not everybody can be Lucky Jacket, Dan. That's all I can really say about that. Lucky Siminovich going to work a couple times here in April against these guys, and we're seeing some of the names that we looked at before. The Sharp brothers are here because they're going to leave Hawaii after just a month or so and head back to the West Coast. I don't know if he takes the Azumafuji with him or not. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but Rikidozan back in the States for sure.
Yep, he is back in the States. He spends a little bit of time in Hawaii, but we've covered most of this. I will say that they would end up having to forfeit that Hawaii tag team title that they won on the 17th.
This is an interesting finish.
Yeah, I don't get how this goes. It's Rikidozan versus the Zebra Kid.
Ricky gets disqualified.
Yeah, he loses by disqualification, but the manner of the disqualification resulted in suspension for him, and this action meant that he had to forfeit the Hawaii tag team title, presumably because he's suspended, therefore he cannot defend it.
makes you wonder what he did here in this match to become disqualified, because Zebra Kid was one of the top heels. George Bolas doing the Zebra Kid character, so I'm assuming he was a heel at this point in time. So for Riki, maybe he lost his cool, something went on there, but kind of interesting. It's quote-unquote suspended because he's leaving the territory, guys, heading off to back to San Francisco, working for Malkowicz.
Now, I'm no booker, but I play one on the podcast.
Sure.
What if there was kind of a redux, a Masahiko Kimura match redux with Zebra Kid, where Rikidozan goes hermitile on him and fake shoots on fake shoots on the guy, and results in this referee actually doing his job and saying, whoa, we don't do that here. And not only are you disqualified, you're suspended for your actions, almost as like a late term punishment for his shoot match a few months earlier.
You know, I don't know if this is going to be covered in the book, but that there's a book about the history of Hawaii wrestling that just dropped, I do believe, and I'm going to go look into that and try to get some information from the guys involved in that. Maybe they might have some information or find a way for us to know, because I'm very curious the story told here to write Rikidozan out here at the big show in Honolulu, the weekly show they did there in Hawaii. He's obviously leaving town, so this was planned, guys. We're not saying that he went into business for himself again, and this time he got shit canned. Now, he worked for Al Karasik here for about a month, comes in, trains a little bit with Azumafuji, and then he's back to San Francisco working for the Malkowicz territory, home of the Sharp Brothers.
Oh, boy. And you know, with the Sharp Brothers, there's one thing that Rikidozan doesn't have to worry about, and that's a win.
I don't know about that. Fast forward to May 12th, Dan.
Holy smokes. He did finally get it. Thank goodness. He shows up in San Francisco on the 10th, and he beats Cliff Olson. Then he beats Gene Dubuque, sorry. Mm-hmm. And then he tags with Leo Nomalini, one of the few guys to get a win over him on his prior excursion to the States against the Sharp Brothers, and they get the win.
Well, you see something special here. I don't believe the Sharp Brothers are the World Tag Team Champions anymore at this point, so it's okay.
Now it's okay. Now that they're not champions, they're allowed to beat them. They would face, he would go revolving around these tag team partners. He's back to Enrique Torres.
Yeah, I was going to say, back with an old friend. Yes, quite a bit.
And facing Gene Dubuque and Cliff Olson, two guys that Rikidozan had defeated, and they defeat him as a tag as well. Rikidozan defeats, I don't know this name, Aldo Bogni, Brown Gattoni again. But
Aldo Bogni. Yeah, he'd been around forever. Or will be around forever, I should say.
Well, I apologize to the family for getting his name wrong.
I think it's okay, man. It's wrestling names, man. Mike Mazurki's here. That's pretty cool. There's some decent names here. Handsome Johnny Barron. Teaming with Handsome Johnny Barron here in May. Wow. I'm ruining everything for you, but I'm just looking at the names.
No, that's okay. Well, we don't need to read it like the last time, because this isn't part of his training. This is part of his money accumulating venture. He's going to save up a bunch of this money so that he can start running shows more in Japan. But where else are you going to get money from?
Yeah,
he's not set. I don't think he's set up to generate a ton of revenue yet from the tours, because he's only doing 20 shows a year. It's not enough to run.
He's racking up the wins here. I'm looking here. I haven't seen a loss yet. We're a couple weeks into this thing. There's some pretty cool names that we're coming into that we did not see last time. We talked about Gattoni, Aldo Bogni, but Mike Mazurki, he teams with Handsome Johnny Barron against Bob Orton Sr. here, which is pretty cool. Goes to a draw with Jess Ortega. Wow, it's just fun to look at some of these names involved. Lord Blears, we've seen that one before. Vic Christie. Mm-hmm. They do take a loss. Rikidozan and Vic Christie, May the 23rd, Sacramento. They lose to the Sharp Brothers. So it depends on the partner, I suppose.
Yeah, my recollection is Vic Christie was a big deal back in the 50s. One of the first matches that I saw from the 50s was Vic Christie in a match, and I thought he was very good. I think it was one of those kinescope matches where they had a film camera facing the television as the television broadcast.
Oh, okay.
But Vic Christie is no slouch. So I don't know who would have taken the pin with Rikidozan and him against the Sharp Brothers.
Right. I remember seeing a match with him against Luthez. I remember seeing Christie against Togo, the great Togo, or that would have been probably in the 50s, early 60s, very early 60s. But yeah, Vic Christie was definitely a big deal.
Yep. He would go on to face Bob Orton in singles matches on the 25th of May and win by DQ. And then mysteriously, or maybe not mysteriously, we don't have the results until June 13th. So several weeks later, he's back against Bob Orton, this time in Sacramento, getting a win by DQ. He faces Robert Pico, tags with six-man tag with Vic Christie and Art Michalek against Gene Kiniski, Gene Dubuque, and Steve Stanley. Is that like the muscle guy, Steve Stanley?
Mr. America or whatever that was? Yeah.
I'm wondering. Oh, but I see the match you're talking about on June 16th. There it is. June 16th with Azumafuji. So now they're teaming up even in the States, in the mainland. So they went from Hawaii, and Azumafuji is showing up in the tag match.
Kind of makes you wonder if Azumafuji was working the undercard on these shows that Riki was already part of. Like if they came over from Hawaii to San Francisco together, seems like it would make sense. But I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a heck of a guess. I'm agreeing with you without even knowing for sure. Maybe this book that's coming out about, well, that wouldn't help for this. We need the history of California wrestling to find out what the full cards were. Yeah. Ben Sharp, singles match, wins by DQ. Ortega defeats Ortega.
We missed another good one here, June 17th in Oakland. Again.
Oh, I apologize, with Leo Nomalini again. And they would go to a draw against Gene Kiniski and Lord Blears, which were, at the time, the NWA World Tag Team Champions.
There we go. So that explains why the Sharp brothers can do a job here and there.
Yeah, and Kiniski at the time wasn't the NWA champion, right? But he would be. Gene Kiniski would be.
Yeah, Kiniski, a future NWA World Champion, that's for sure.
All right, Jess Ortega, Gene Dubuque, tagging with Enrique Torres versus Gene Kiniski, Lord Blears, and they get another draw. So he doesn't even need Leo Nomalini. He can do it with his old school tag team partner, the Enrique old OG tag team partner.
Yeah. So he's right back to the same thing he was doing with the Sharp brothers, just with the new World Tag Team Champions, Kiniski and Lord Blears here against Torres, his old partner. So we're kind of seeing a rekindling of memories gone by, just with new players involved.
Yep, and he's still chasing that tag team title. Last 3 dates here in Oakland, California. He teams with Art Michalek against the Sharps and takes an L in Reno, Nevada, which is a long way from Oakland, California. I'm kind of surprised they went that far out of the way to have a show on the 26th of June. And Rikidozan will be teaming with Azumafuji against the Sharps and losing again. I'm betting that Rikidozan didn't take a fall in that match.
Wow, it's a hell of a match. That's one I would have liked to have seen. That would have been interesting.
Yeah, that would have been interesting. I agree with you. On the 28th of June in San Francisco in the Coliseum Bowl, Rikidozan would defeat Gene Dubuque in 20 minutes, 43 seconds by DQ. And that would be the end of his Hawaii/US excursion. And that takes us all the way, half the way through 1955. Wow, just in the last 30 minutes.
What a way to wrap up the show here this week. 1954 really was the show for me, but this was just like bonus here, being able to break into the Yamaguchi match. I thought maybe we would end there, but we still had time left. So to be able to go all the way through Rikidozan's run here, back in the States once again, going back to good old trusty Hawaii, working for Al Karasik and Bobby Bruns, and then fast forward a little bit into May and June, working the San Francisco territory once again for Malkowicz. So he seems to stay right there on the Pacific coast and into the Pacific Ocean, if you will, in Hawaii. But it seems like just the two territories. We did see a couple of Los Angeles results in the past, but specifically working these two territories, but it's working out good for him.
Yeah, he's getting the seasoning he needs, and he's getting to be what might be main event or semi-main event matches, so he can make good money, and he's there to bring up Azumafuji and get him acclimated to pro wrestling so he can bring him back to Japan and make money with a Yokozuna from Sumo, which is going to be carrying quite a bit of weight towards the fans and the casual fans and the sports fans to see a Yokozuna participating in pro wrestling. So it'll be interesting to see how his career progresses in Japan, because I think you need to put this guy over super strong.
Yeah, and I wonder how well things traveled back in the 1950s in regards to Japan to the United States. If anybody heard about the Kimura situation or how that played out here in the wrestling world, I don't know that all that buzz was going around, but just looking back now and seeing Rikidozan come back here and team up with guys like Leo Nomalini and work guys like Gene Kiniski and Bob Orton Sr. and whatnot. It's kind of a mark out moment for me to see him continue to, climb in the ring with these guys in the States while he's still building up the JWA promotion in Japan, because we're going to see a lot of big names travel over there in the years to come.
Yeah, it is neat to see these guys as first-generation wrestlers when 3 generations later, they would still have people with the Orton name wrestling. It's really neat to see.
Yeah, very cool, man. Dan, what a fun episode. We were all over the place, and I'm not saying that in a bad way at all. It's just so many different things happening to continue to build the foundation, really, of the history here. I mean, we have been going now for several episodes, but I feel like we're still just building the foundation because Rikidozan's building the foundation still at this point. He's still, even though he's drawing and he's a movie star or whatever you want to call it, he's still really just getting started.
Yeah, we're watching closely at all of these moves Rikidozan's making because we know what it builds to. And the things that he's doing are important because they mean something as the promotion moves forward.
Right.
So we're trying to keep track of every little thing he does because we know that it has value and importance and meaning as he develops JWA and tries to increase his exposure, which he succeeds at.
Well, not to put you on the spot, but I know you do your research very well. So I'm going to ask you, do you have an idea of what some of the topics might be on the next episode as we continue on through 1955 here?
Sure. When he gets done with this tour in 1955, they would have a monstrous tour coming back that starts in July and doesn't end to really the end of September. It's almost 40 shows.
So you're talking about going back to Japan?
Yes, I apologize. I should have mentioned June 28th in San Francisco. That was his last show in the States. He would fly back because he is about to complete a new 5-story Rikidozan dojo across the street from the old dojo that they just had that TV show in.
Yeah, he gave that one to Kimura. I'm just kidding, guys.
So even in 1955, he was called the Japan Pro Wrestling Center, and the first floor was used as a venue for TV matches. Oh. So now he's starting to figure out studio wrestling.
I was going to say studio wrestling, yeah.
Studio wrestling is super cheap to run, and it's a lot easier to control, and you don't have to sell tickets for it, and you get total control over the television production, so it's a useful tool. And Jim Barnett was a guy who really popularized that in the 50s, the early 50s, the concept of studio wrestling as opposed to live venues. So Rikidozan's taking a page out of Jim Barnett's book.
It's going to be very interesting to see what happens here as we head back to Japan on the next episode. Rikidozan doesn't stay long here in the States in 1955. He's headed back to continue to build the empire in Japan, his homeland. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with a lot of the guys on the card, see if they rise, they fall, some other names that may be debuting. But really going forward, I mean, Azumafuji, Toyonobori, obviously Surigami and Endo, we've already talked about quite a bit. So it's going to be interesting to see where these guys lie on the card moving forward and some of the other names that will be part of this upcoming big tour. You said over 40 shows, so that's a pretty big tour.
Yeah, now that Rikidozan has established his dominance by taking out Yamaguchi and Kimura, we can focus our attention not only on what Rikidozan's doing overall, but also the people under him jockeying for position and moving up that ladder. This is going to be the interesting part, and this is where the tour analysis is going to be particularly handy, where we look at how many wins and losses and who's beating who. This is all going to matter and play out because he's establishing his roster going forward because it doesn't have Yamaguchi or Kimura on it. So now he's got to create stars.
Right. Rikidozan's spot is secure on the top. So really, it's all about creating stars underneath them to really fill out that card. So it's going to be very interesting moving forward to see how everything plays out. And I'm looking forward to it, Dan. So I got to tell you, really appreciate you doing this show because I learned something new lots of things every week right now, going back to the 50s and as we continue to move forward. So I just appreciate you being here, and I really enjoyed yet another episode of the program.
Well, I enjoyed doing it, finding that blog about Japanese, random Japanese stuff, and having a wrestling blog post was something I didn't expect I was going to find, especially talking about TV coverage from 1954. But sure enough, I found it in the last week. I'm still learning. I've never stopped researching it, and I don't know if I ever will. So I'm happy to talk about it, and I'm having a really good time doing it.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap us up here this week. Another edition of Puro Wrestling Academy in the books. So, Dan, I'll let you sign off.
Ladies and gentlemen, class is dismissed.